Hello, my curious friends, and welcome to Crimes and Curiosities, the show where we will be exploring the strange, the shocking, and human nature's craziest and darkest corners. I'm your host, Charity, and it is fall, y'all, my absolute favorite time of year. Everything is crunchy and cold, and the drinks are warm and cozy, and I love it. I love every part of it. Thanksgiving is my absolute favorite holiday. Shout out to you Christmas crazies, but Thanksgiving is my day. I love it. I love every single part of it. The turkey, the football, it is just my day. So on that note, I wanted to dive into a case that kind of focused around or on the date of Thanksgiving. And boy, did I find one. Because the day that I have found was November 28th of 1991. A day that would go down in infamy because of one person and her decision that would rock a nation. Today is the story of Omaima Nelson, also known as the Black Widow of Costa Mesa. Born in 1968, Cairo, Egypt, Omaima was one of 16, you heard that right, 16 children, though she only grew up with a few of her siblings and her mom. And this is because her mom would later in her childhood get divorced from her dad due to years of physical and sexual abuse. In fact, he was known to be quite the authoritarian in their household. And when she was 6 years old, he would actually be the one to make the decision for her to have what's known as a female circumcision or a clitorectomy. It's also known as genital mutilation. Though at that time, it was considered culturally acceptable. Her specific procedure was also done without anesthesia. So this is something that obviously caused a lot of severe trauma for her at the time, but would continue on in her life to cause long-lasting psychological and physical damage as confirmed by later doctor testimonies. Now, this is something that was done at their time to promote cultural purity, but something that Omaima would later state is that even at the age of 6 years old, it was just something else that promoted in her own mind that her body was not her own and something that she couldn't even make her own personal decisions on, which is not something that you want your child to feel. Now, growing up, her family would be in quite a state of poverty, and Omaima would also state later claims that she would have to do a lot of dark things to survive. I can only imagine the amount of physical and emotional and sexual abuse that she went through as a child. She probably spent a lot of her life in fight or flight, basically doing whatever she could just to survive. Now, when she was older, around early 20s, she would meet an American named Roger Stainbrook, and they would hit it off quite well, actually. They would get married, and through this marriage, Omaima would move to the States and gain her U.S. citizenship. This was great for Omaima because even though the marriage itself did not last, her citizenship did. And for the first time in her life, she felt free. She had no man in her life telling her what she could or could not do. She had no father, no husband. She was, for all intents and purposes, free to do whatever she wanted. And she used that freedom. After the marriage ended, she would move to a small southern town in California called Costa Mesa, where she would work as both a nanny and a model. She would date quite a lot of men, which isn't really the issue here. More so the fact that she was known to be quite manipulative with these men, often giving them even fake names, never quite being fully herself with them. Despite this, she was still described as a beautiful, exotic, very charming woman, not just by these men, but by many of her friends. They would often claim that she was the type of person that things would just come naturally to. However, it was also during this time that a lot of the darkness that hid within Omaima would start to surface. It would start with small things like shoplifting, and then shoplifting became assault. And then from assault, we saw robbery. And from robbery, we saw car theft. Now, these car theft claims would come from some of her boyfriends claiming that she would steal their cars. And then an assault claim would even come from one of her boyfriends stating that she held him at knife point during what she claimed was a sex game gone wrong. Oh dear. But all of this is just to say that a pattern was forming with Omaima, a pattern of charm and destruction. And this would lead up to 1991 in October, where she would meet William or Bill Nelson. Now, Omaima and Bill met in a pool hall in Huntington Beach in October of 1991, late October of 1991. Bill was a very charming, very handsome, very well-to-do man, if you will. He was an ex-Marine, a pilot, even a computer programmer. But in addition to this, he was also twice her age. Bill was 56 years old and Omaima was 23. But where they differed in age, they were very similar in characteristics. See, Bill also had a little bit of trouble with the law. And that is putting it lightly, considering Bill had just gotten out of prison. And he was in prison for trying to smuggle 100 tons of marijuana across the Mexican and U.S. border. Something that he had done apparently many times before. Bill was also known to have quite a bit of a temper, but at this moment in time, he was very charismatic. He was quite wealthy, and he got along very well with Omaima. And so well, in fact, that just 2 days after they met, Bill and Omaima would be engaged. Now, this is where the story kind of begins to change, but it also gets questionable. Because it's at this point that Omaima would claim that within 5 days of them getting engaged, or about a week, they would get married. Although there's no court records to actually back up these claims. Many of the sources would even claim that they were just live-in lovers because there were no court documents actually showing them to have gotten married. But either way, this is when they start their lives together. And they start by going on a honeymoon to Texas to meet some of Bill's family members. And it's at this time that Bill would start to show his dark side towards Omaima. He would start becoming very controlling, especially when it came to their sex life. Omaima would state that he was into things such as BDSM, which is something that she claimed not to be into due to the fact that she had her clitorectomy at 6 years old, causing some physical pain, some discomfort in sex. So anything like that would just make her uncomfortable. But if she were to deny him, like when she did, according to her claims, on the way home from their honeymoon, in the car, he would make advances towards her and she would say no. Bill would get incredibly upset. At one point, even throwing her new adopted kitten out the car window while they were driving down the highway. At other times, he would say that if she continued to deny him what was his, that he would call immigration on her and claim her to be a Mexican prostitute. We're just going to skip over the racism there. And also move on to the fact that he would threaten to leave her in the desert and make additional claims such as, I'm going to get what I paid for. So, all in all, Bill is definitely working up to show that he is not the greatest man in the world. And Omaima is realizing just what kind of a mess she may have gotten herself into by marrying this man, or being engaged to him at least. Over the next few weeks, this violence of sorts would continue. In fact, Omaima would even claim that he would go as far as to pimping her out to some of his friends for cash, for rent, and at one point even a car. But all of this would lead up to November 28th of 1991, Thanksgiving morning. It was on this morning that Bill would attempt to perform another one of his sex games where he would tie her up to the bed. And at this point, he would even threaten to kill her. Now, due to this and just a combination of the buildup from all of the torture that she had been through over the previous month, and most likely even some of just the past trauma of the things that she went through growing up, Omaima broke. She said she was finally able to get one of her hands free, and in that moment, she grabbed the lamp at their bedside table and hit him over the head with it. And when she was done with the lamp, she found a pair of scissors. And with the scissors, she would proceed to stab Bill over 20 times. And then when she was done with the scissors, she would proceed to grab a clothes iron and bash him so hard with the iron that it would break in her hands. Now, if we were to stop the story here, it would be an obvious tale of self-defense. This woman has gone through not just a horrendous marriage, relationship, obviously filled with rape, sexual abuse, and assault, but she's also gone through a lifetime of this. And she snapped. She did what most women would do and just fight back. And had she done what should have been the obvious next step, which is call the police, explain what happened, and basically make the report so that way she can move on with her life as someone who defended herself, this may have ended completely differently. But unfortunately, that is not what happened next. The decision that Omaima would make next would put her on the front page of news everywhere, comparing her to things such as Hannibal Lecter and Black Widows. Now, what would happen next? Omaima states that she was in kind of a fugue state. And this is something that would even be confirmed by later psychiatrists that she would speak to about this. This would also take a period of 12 hours, all of which during a time that Omaima says she has very little memory. But what we do know of this time is that she would start by dismembering Bill's body, piece by piece. We know that she would attempt to put quite a lot of it down the garbage disposal. In fact, we have quotes from many of her neighbors stating that the garbage disposal would run for hours that day. They could hear it through the walls. So we knew that she was going for quite some time at trying to get all of Bill down the garbage disposal. She would also take his hands and boil them on the stove in an attempt to remove the fingerprints. She wrapped his head in foil and put it in the freezer, even stating that she had plans to later crush his teeth, most likely in an attempt to remove any potential ID through dental records. She's even known to have castrated Bill, which Makes sense considering the trauma that she went through. Not excusing, just saying, yeah, that tracks. Along with a multitude of other things were done to this body. However, the claim here that sticks out to most, and the thing specifically that has made this case so over the top, what? Is the fact that she would then proceed to cook Bill's ribs, prepare them with barbecue sauce, and according to her, and I quote, prepare them as they would in a restaurant. They were so sweet. They were so tender. She ate his ribs. She ate his ribs. According to her. That's it's still allegedly. Allegedly she ate his ribs because while she told the psychiatrist that yes, she did eat his ribs, she has since recounted these claims. But she ate his ribs, allegedly. So that happens. Moving on from this, it gets to a point where Omaima realizes that she has no idea what to actually do with Bill. She knows she needs to dispose of him, but she has no idea how. There's so much. Because even despite all of the dismembering, all of the garbage disposal, everything that she has done, she has 11 Tupperware containers and a freezer full and a massive luggage bag full of various pieces. She has no idea what to do. So it's at this point that she actually starts to reach out to some of her ex-boyfriends. One of which is Jose Esquivel. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. If not, definitely let me know. And Jose would go on to tell reporters that she had shown up to his apartment, banging on the door, pleading for his help. She was in a complete and total panic, stating that she had been abused, she had been raped, that Bill had just been absolutely awful to her and she lost it and she killed him. And she went on to explain to him everything that had happened. And Jose is sitting here listening to all of this in a complete state of shock. And just going along with everything, Omaima takes him out to her car, which is Bill's car, to show him the duffel bag she has full of wrapped up newspaper with you know who inside. And Jose freaks out. It's at this moment that he's like, nope, I'm done. I don't want any part of this. And mind you, Omaima has also offered him $75,000 to help hide the body. On top of all of this, she is now also offering $75,000. Dear gracious. But Jose's not having any of it. He runs back into the house, tells her to never contact him again, and immediately calls the police. Good job, Jose. I understand. This is a mess of a case, but good job, Jose, because that is what you do in this situation. You call the police, you let them know what happened, and you let them handle it from there. And that's exactly what they do. Because police then show up to Omaima's house. They look through the car and they find the duffel bag full of you know what. They find everything in the fridge. They find the hands still on the stove along with the ribs. They see the blood everywhere in the bedroom, in the kitchen, all over the apartment. And Omaima is immediately arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and I believe also she is still facing charges at this time for the assault on one of her ex-boyfriends for the knife to his throat. So she is about to go through quite a lot in trial. So here we are 1 year later, December 1st of 1992, Omaima Nelson's trial officially begins. And the prosecution immediately starts. They compare her to Hannibal Lecter, which, by the way, is the #1 movie in the box office at this time. Great timing. They compare her to Black Widows. They talk about how manipulating she is, how she preyed on men's weaknesses. But the defense would hold another story, that she was a trauma survivor, that she had learned how to do whatever it took to survive, that despite all of this trauma, she fought back, but then her brain broke, and that she went into this fugue state and just went through the motions of trying to dispose of this person who had done so much harm to her, but that she wasn't even just doing it to him, but she was doing it to all of the men that had hurt her. That for her, this was not killing, but it was survival. By the end of her meeting with the psychiatrist, Omaima was even diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and PTSD. He would even claim that because of this fugue state she was in, there was a bit of a blurred line between the trauma that she had endured and the intent behind the actual murder. There was no question as to if she murdered Bill, because when she was first arrested, she had denied everything, despite already admitting to Jose that she had murdered Bill, as well as other ex-boyfriends. She was denying everything. But pretty soon after that, she did start to claim self-defense, including to her psychiatrist, where she let go of everything and told them everything. So the question is never, did she or didn't she? The question was, how long had she been intending to? And so that is a lot of what these psychiatrists had discussed with her, as well as in court, was her mental state, what she had been through, and how much that affected what she did on that fateful Thanksgiving morning. Now, despite prosecutors' very strong case of the fact that she stabbed him dozens of times, she hit him so hard with an iron that it broke in her hands. It was obviously a strong case of anger-filled motive. After 6 days of deliberation, the jury would come back and find her guilty of second-degree murder and not first. And so for those of you that don't fully understand that difference, first-degree murder is something that has been planned ahead of time. So let's say she decided maybe 30 minutes before that she was going to kill him. That would be first-degree murder. But if she simply decided in that moment, whether it be the moment she grabbed the lamp, whether it be the moment she grabbed the knife, or whether it be that she never fully intended to murder Bill, but it was just something that happened when she started to fight back, that would be second-degree murder. And that is what they found her guilty of, with one of the jury members even stating there just wasn't enough evidence for first-degree murder. So it was done. She was found guilty in January of 1993, and by March, she was convicted to 27 years to life in jail. Now, she would go on to marry someone else while in prison, someone who has since passed as well. This one, I believe, a natural death. But in 2008 and in 2011, she faced 2 different parole hearings, of which she was denied each one. But what is notable here is that in 2011, when asked why she should be let out on parole, she would claim that she's not a monster, and that the fact that her then husband was able to visit her for her conjugal visits and go and be alone with her in the trailer that had knives and come out still alive should be proof enough. She was literally saying, I had knives there. I had opportunities to kill him. He's still alive. That's good enough, right? No, Omaima, that's not good enough. Sorry. No. Yeah, thankfully, the parole hearing would have the parole hearing? The people in charge of her parole. We'll go with that. The people in charge of her parole were not having any of that. They were like, no. So she was denied parole twice, but it's fine because guess what? She comes up for parole again next year in 2026. So that is the story of Omaima Nelson, a story of childhood trauma, a lifelong set of trauma, the possibility of freedom, of new dreams in a new land, turned further heartbreak and hurt and murder. So here's my question for you. Do you think that Omaima could have possibly found her way to a new and better life had she maybe sought some help for the trauma that she had faced already? Maybe if she had seen a psychiatrist before getting involved with a new man? Or do you think she was always destined to end up where she did? This case it is difficult because you can see so much sympathy for somebody who has been through that much trauma. But at what point does someone's trauma no longer excuse who they are as an adult? I mean, going through something traumatic at 6 years old should not excuse murdering someone at 23. But what do you think? Do you think that she was a victim? Or do you think she was just a mass manipulator who ended up exactly where she was always meant to? Do you think that her childhood fully played a role in this? Or do you think that she was a victim of circumstance, something that just happened to her? But either way, thank you for sticking with me through this really dark chapter of history. I am very interested in reading more stories like this, as well as hearing any stories from you. If you know of any crazy stories, maybe some that happened around holidays, or even some that didn't, let me know down in the comments. I definitely want to hear from you. Let me know of any of your thoughts on this case, or any other cases that you may know of. Don't forget to like, share, and comment down below. Have a great holiday.